Yo, what's up, y'all? We out here once again trying to get 3 degrees buffer. I'm Gordiaco Corey Johnson, and today's class was actually really dope. Not gonna lie, yesterday I was kind of drifting in and out of sleep a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It happens sometimes. But today's class, it was on point. It was so on point that it is currently 12:14 a.m. I have class at 8 a.m. tomorrow, but I need to record these videos and I haven't had a chance all afternoon. So I'm doing it now while this stuff is still somewhat fresh. I got my notes here. I'm gonna play off of that for a little bit, but this is 1 or 2 videos I'm gonna make for today. Now, we started out by talking about time, right? And the idea was that when you look at the calendar that we have in the year, 365 days, we got New Year's, we got Christmas, we got Independence Day, all these different holidays, whatever. And generally speaking, a lot of people celebrate the holidays, maybe the majority, I'm not really sure. But when it comes to kind of within spirituality, the calendar's a lot different. Obviously, we have the day of worship and rest every week. That's part of the calendar. There are other events that happen at different points throughout the year in the calendar. But what was interesting was when we compared Russian Orthodoxy, when we compared Buddhist tradition, we compared Hinduist tradition to kind of our religious tradition, those calendars never really match up. For example, Christmas time would be a time when more people are open to the ideas that surround Jesus, whether it's singing the songs, whether it's the message that comes with that, whether they're secular or not, more people are open to that. But for missionaries, a lot of times that's vacation, so we're home. So who's going to be in the field to capitalize on the opportunities to have great conversations with people while they're open during that time of year? So that's one example. Another example would have been, let's take the Buddhist calendar, right? And how a lot of the things that they have, very highly spiritual people and religious people, but for Christians, they look at everything the Buddhists do as being pagan, and they don't try to engage with them or understand where they're coming from at all. We actually had a really cool presentation about how even a verse as simple as John 3:16, which seems so basic and all-encompassing for your typical Christian, could be completely and would be completely misunderstood by a Buddhist because of the way that they identify with words like God, what it means to them when you say gave, only begotten, eternal life. All of those things don't mean to Buddhists the same things that they mean to Christians. So without having any idea of the context that they live in, without that understanding of the language, you're going in thinking you're talking about something that's so valuable to you, and really you're just confusing the hell out of people. So, really good presentation on that point. But these are the points that I wanted to mention given this thing. When we separate, I'm a Christian, all right? I'm pretty sure you know this by now. But when and I'm saying I'm not talking about me, but I'm being inclusive and I'm putting myself in the pot as well. When I look at something that's not Christian and say, that is just pagan, I don't want anything to do with that, I'm cutting off people on multiple levels, because not only am I telling them that their culture sucks, essentially, and that I don't want to have anything to do with that, but I'm also cutting off any potential that I would have to reach them at the times where they are more open according to their calendar. I should be looking to match up the things of my spiritual calendar with theirs so I can engage with them in a time when they're leaning more towards spiritual things. And this is whether you're in a more religious culture or if you're in a more secular culture, you can do the same thing, which is pretty cool in concept. Obviously, it's different if you try to put it in action, but there are definitely some of my classmates who have done this and are looking forward to doing this after we finish our next week of classes. So it'll be cool. I'm going to be keeping up with them as well, so I'm sure I'll get some of those stories. Now, yes, this next point right here, we end up becoming experts in alienating people, and that's the exact opposite of what Christ did. I made a YouTube short. Shoot, by this time it might have been up here weeks ago. Let me see. Just posted it. At the time of recording this video, I posted it 7 minutes ago. All right. But by the time you see this video, it would have been a couple weeks. Either way, the point was that Jesus used words to create community, to tear down walls, to make things more inclusive, and yet we use our words to make things very exclusive, to eliminate people and to build walls. So it's the exact opposite of what Christ did with his words, and we don't notice it, even though I claim I'm a Christian and that I'm following Christ and he's my example, but I'm using one of my greatest tools in a way that's completely contrary to the way that he used one of his greatest tools through his words. Here's another pretty cool thing. So one of my classmates, he's a pastor of a church, I think in Kansas or Nebraska, something like that. And his church has been doing this thing every year where they're handing out this book called The Great Controversy. Now, to the point of the video a couple days ago at this point, we talked about the assumptions that Christianity and Adventism makes, that the first coming of Christ is already point. Everybody gets that already. So there's a lot more emphasis on the second coming. But the problem is the Great Controversy is that kind of end time, second coming based book. But we don't see the initiatives as much to get out books like Steps to Christ, which focus more on the first coming of Christ, the incarnation, and how you and I relate to Jesus as a person. So we're making the same jump that we have in our mission and vision and values. We're making the same jump to the next stage based on the assumptions we think everyone should already be at and have. And when it comes to the books, we're doing the same thing. Now, is that going to impact some people positively? Sure. But the majority of those books, you hope they go out and you hope they make an impact. But if we're being honest, it's really tough to say you're going to see a lot of the results of that. Now, the reason I even have some context on this is because I've been a canvasser for a number of years, and I've seen how hard we push to get that book out, and we view it as the most important book that we have because of the story that it tells. But even in myself looking back, I wish I would have adjusted different. Because when I think about it, the spiritual book that we had that sold the most was the one called Peace Above the Storm, which is Steps to Christ. And there's a reason for that. People can relate to that a lot easier and a lot better, especially as a secular, before they're going to take the leap to something like The Great Controversy, which again is great and it makes sense. But you can't make the assumption that the people that you meet, every single person you meet out there is already with this same set of assumptions, so they're ready for the next set. All right. If this foundation of who Jesus is and how I relate to him as a person isn't established, then the second coming is not going to be valuable to them. Why would someone care that Jesus is coming back again if they never got to appreciate him coming the first time? All right. That's what I'm saying there. So we have, and we do have this, because I even had somebody comment on one of my, I think it was a TikTok video that I did, and I posted it to YouTube as well. But they said, follow Christ and not the Bible. Now, why is that? People don't have a problem with Jesus, the person. But when it comes to the Bible is often associated with religion. And that's where people's interpretations come in. So how are people manipulating scripture in the text to say what they wanted to say when it comes to following Jesus? It's like, oh yeah, I get what that guy was about. It makes sense. So I can't be mad at them for that, especially when we look at the Bible in such a prophetic and end time lens, and we skip a lot of times the beautiful part about it to reach out to people who need to appreciate or to experience that first coming of Christ at first. Yeah. All right. So the next point, we were talking about how ultimately when we're looking at the time, the calendars that we have within our spirituality compared to other secular groups and their calendars and other religious groups and their calendars, a lot of times what ends up happening is we put this barbed wire around our belief system so that nothing pagan or nothing polluting can get in there. And so we'll be safe and we'll be good and we'll be able to say that we were great Christians. But the problem is, learning goes both ways, right? It's impossible for me to go into a culture and wall off myself completely from that culture and yet try to reach that culture. That doesn't make any sense. And then I get stuck with the classic, I'm upset because no one's listening. I feel like my work is being done in vain, but I haven't even spent 2 cents worth of time trying to understand the language and the context that I'm living in before trying to put my way and my cultural approach of things on there. Doesn't make any sense. We have to be willing to ask questions beyond what we think we are there to do. We have to be willing to say, you know what? Let me think outside of this box, and let me not get so hung up on what I think I'm supposed to be doing here, but let me actually see what the people need. That way I can reach out to those needs and address those needs, because the great controversy mass distribution is going to impact some people, but only people who already have a certain mentality and things like that. But for the majority of the people, they're still trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from. They're trying to figure out what to do with so-and-so who's beaten so-and-so in this relationship. They're trying to figure out what to do with kids who are not responding and out doing drugs and drinking. They're trying to figure out how to respond when a family member passed away in a car accident tragically and suddenly. They're dealing with those things, and the incarnation of Christ coming down here to heal people, to help people, to speak life into people. That's what they need. That's the thing that's going to make the impact. More so than just the end of time and being grateful that God's going to raise everyone from the dead and all the other stuff. Like, that's great for that time. But there's something about Jesus that applies to the here and the now. A lot of times we miss that because we think the question, it's like, how did he put it? We're answering questions that no one's asking. I'm getting ahead of myself because that's the next video topic, so I'll stop there. So when it comes to this barbed wire that we have around kind of our religion to protect us from the outside, we essentially need to get rid of our spiritual pride and say, you know what, I can learn something from these other people that will actually help me be more effective in reaching them. Short example. So I, in my mission field experience, and I'll talk about this in brief because I have already recorded videos on this, but in my mission experience, I came back in 2015 as a chaplain, Bible teacher. I had this idea of everything that I was going to do. My idea of how I wanted to run things was up here, and my openness to something completely different was down here. But very quickly I realized that, you know what, I don't know anything. I need to listen more. I need to get off of what I think I need to say, and I need to listen more to what my students are saying, and that's what's going to give me the knowledge of how to approach this class and this teaching experience. So I took down the things that I thought I needed to do, and I listened more, which I didn't think I was initially going to do, and that's what made my experience great. That's what made it fantastic and enjoyable, not just for me as a teacher, but especially and more importantly for my students. So being able to get rid of that pride when it comes to dealing with other people, especially if you're going in with the mindset that I have something to share, take a step back, be humble, and realize that whatever you can learn from the other person may in fact help you share the thing that you ultimately do want to share. So that was valuable for me, and I think it'll be valuable for you too. Okay, so last couple things here. Our current identity, right? Within Christianity, classically, we have this kind of identity. These are the things that we're supposed to say. Because these dates have already happened, these are the things that need to be the focus of our ministry, right? But it ends up separating us from everyone else around us. It isolates us, and that's because we focus so much on the end time as opposed to Jesus in present time, helping people, right? So how do we change that? How do we redefine our identity that will allow us to say, you know what? Yeah, reaching out with the great controversy is good, but what else can we do? How else can we impact our community? Being change agents to say, yeah, this identity, there's nothing wrong with that, and it may have applied maybe more perfectly at a certain time, but maybe I can tweak this thing to be more relevant to the people I'm serving right now. That's huge, and I think that's something that we need to consider. We talk about Christ's method, which starts with the idea of mingling with others, right? But the next part is meeting the needs of the people But guess what? You can't meet the needs of the people if you don't get to know the people. If I go in with my agenda and what I think people need and what I think it's my job to do, then I only end up doing that one thing. And the few that it impacts, it does. And I'm missing out on impacting people who have real needs that they would be more than willing to communicate if I were to ask them. But because I go in my arrogance and my spiritual pride, I never ask those questions. I'm not listening enough. I go in, I do my thing. I think I've had a great experience and I leave, right? But it needs to flip. It needs to flip. You can't have any idea what the needs are if you don't engage with the people to find out what those needs are. So learning how to become a change agent and be willing to say, yeah, this is this image that I built up as to what my identity is. But let me take a step away from kind of the concrete construct of what that thing is and think more on, okay, how can I relate to that person right in front of me right now? What is it that they need? And how can I pull something outside of my identity? And how does my identity relate to that need? Not the needs I think people have, but the needs that are expressed to me. How does my identity respond to that? So I think that's really valuable. It was a really dope conversation today in class. Learning new stuff. Only one more week to go. Hopefully we can keep it up. But yeah, we out here trying to get 3 degrees buffer. And you can see my eyes about to pass out. You can hear me. It's time to go to sleep, yo. We out of here. Peace.